In this video, we'll look at adding integers. Up first, if the integers have the same sign. If they're both positive, we add the absolute values. The result is positive. For example, 15 plus 6, recognize that both of these are positive. 15 plus 6, we simply add to get 21. If they're both negative, we add the absolute values, then the result is negative. For example, negative 12 plus negative 13. We add the absolute values to get 25, but then we make the answer negative. If the signs are different, that is, one is positive and one is negative, we subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. The result takes the sign of the integer with the larger absolute value. For example, negative 20 plus 14. The absolute value of negative 20 is 20. The absolute value of 14 is 14. We subtract those numbers to get 6, but then we make that 6 negative because the negative 20 has a larger absolute value than the 14. In the example 32 plus negative 12, we take the absolute value of 32 and then we subtract the absolute value of negative 12, which is 12. This will give us 20. We make the answer positive since the larger absolute value is the positive number. In this example, we have a negative number plus a positive number. Here we're going to subtract. We take 261 minus 175. We need to borrow from the 6, making the 6 a 5. We'll put a 1 beside the 1. 11 minus 5 is 6. Again, we need to borrow from the 2, making the 2 a 1. And we'll put a 1 beside the 5, making that 15. 15 minus 7 is 8. 1 minus 1 is 0, so we just get 86. Then we need to ask, is this a positive or a negative number? Notice that the larger absolute value is positive. 261 is positive, 175 is negative. Since the larger absolute value is a positive number, the solution is positive 86. In the next example, we have negative 316 plus 179. We'll take the larger absolute value, 316, and subtract the smaller absolute value, 179. We need to borrow from the 1, giving us 16 minus 9, which is 7. Then we need to borrow from the 3, giving us 10 minus 7, which is 3. And then 2 minus 1 is 1. We have 137. But then we have to ask, is that positive or negative? Go back to the original. The larger absolute value is the negative 316. Notice it's a larger absolute value than the absolute value of 179. So we stick with the negative number. Up next, we have two negative numbers that we're adding. 1,268, 2,509. Since they have the same sign, we're simply going to add these to begin with. We get 17, carry the 1, 7, 7, 3. And since both of the integers are negative, the sum must also be negative. In example D, we have two positive numbers that we're adding together. So this is just addition like usual. 8 plus 2 is 10. We'll carry the 1. Then we get 6 and then 10. So we have 1,060. The answer is positive since both original integers are positive. In this example, we have multiple integers that we're adding together. Let's just take it one step at a time. Negative 2 plus 3. That becomes 1. Then we'll just copy the rest for now. Next we have 1 plus negative 1. 1 plus negative 1 is 0. Then 0 plus negative 5 will be negative 5. Again, in this example, we have multiple integers that we are adding together, one step at a time. 10 plus negative 14. 10 plus negative 14 is negative 4. And we'll copy the rest. Negative 4 plus 9. Negative 4 plus 9 is 5. Next, 5 plus negative 3, that is 2. And finally, 2 plus 6 gives us 8. In this example, we have some word problems to look at. A checking account has a balance of $496. What will the balance be after depositing a check for $274? We're starting with a positive value of $496, and we're adding to that. Notice we made a deposit, so we are adding the 274. 10, carry the 1. Then we get 17, carry the 1, and 7. $770 is the total after making the deposit. In part B, a diver is 26 feet below their boat and then decides to dive an additional 12 feet. How far below the boat is the diver? We're starting out at 26 feet below, but then they go down further 12 more feet. So we'll add those, giving us 38 feet. They're 38 feet below the boat now. Part C, a mountain climber is at an elevation of 217 feet. They decide to go down the mountain 62 feet. What is the elevation of the climber? They start out at 217 feet and then they're going down. So here we are subtracting 62. 7 minus 2 is 5. 11 minus 6 is 5. And then we bring down the 1. So at this point, they are 155 feet in elevation. Part D. When you woke up in the morning, the temperature was negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. By lunchtime, the temperature had increased by 21 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the temperature outside? Starting at negative 4 degrees and then adding 21 degrees. Here we're going to use subtraction. 21 minus 4. We need to borrow from the 2. 11 minus 4 is 7. Then we bring down the 1. It started out at negative 4, but then increased by 21 degrees. So the temperature outside now is 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, we'll evaluate the absolute value of negative 21 plus 30. Negative 21 plus 30, we can do that off to the side. Here, since one integer is negative and one is positive, we can subtract these numbers, giving us 9. The larger of those is positive, so we have the absolute value of 9, which is then 9. In part B, we have negative 6 plus negative 9. Again, the 6 and the 9 are one's positive, one's negative, so we will subtract those, giving us 3. The 9 was negative to begin with, which is a bigger absolute value than the positive 6. So our answer is actually negative 3 inside the bars. The absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3, but we have a negative on the outside of the absolute value bars. So our final answer is negative 3. In part A of example 6, we are making a substitution. We're going to replace the x with negative 29. Negative 29 plus 5. Here we are adding the two integers. Since they're different signs, we can use subtraction. 29 minus 5. That will give us 24. And we use negative 24 since the larger absolute value between 29 and 5 is negative. Our answer is negative. In part B, plug in negative 31. And notice that both signs are negative, so we can simply add these two numbers, 52 and 31, giving us 83. But we make it negative since both signs are negative to begin with.